Good morning, guys. Welcome to the Sunday gathering. Happy Sunday. Happy 8th day. It's good to see y'all again this morning. I've just sat down after getting some stuff done, and so let me check back through your chat. It's good to see all you guys. Good morning, Ed. Good morning, Red Raven. Rick. Robert. Good morning, Eric. Thank you so much, Eric, for your support. I appreciate that. And Eric, remember to email me or in some other way notify me what your account is on the app, and I will extend your membership for your support there. Good morning, Patriot. Kathy, good morning. Good morning. Julia. Deborah, it's good to see all you guys. Who else we got? KK Moon, good morning. Mike, Alvin. We have AnMill44. Good morning to you. I'm glad you could catch it with us this morning. That's awesome. I'm sorry you're sick, though. I'm sorry you're feeling bad. There's a lot of that going around right now. 'Tis the allergy season for sure. Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Gay. And I think that covers everybody. Good morning, Black Sheep. It's good to see you. All right. Well, I see a couple of you have mentioned some topics for discussion today. Please remember that that's what we're doing right now. And if you're new, you can put a topic in the chat and I'll try to pick that up and then add it to our list of things we're going to talk about today. Let's see. Let me go back up here and make sure. So, Kathy, you mentioned Deuteronomy 23:2. So let me put that on the list. Okay, yeah, got that for you, Kathy. Now let's see what else we have here. All right. Robert, you ask about high technological discoveries in AI. Does this represent man trying to reach the heavens? Yeah, we'll talk about that. Thank you, Robert. Red Raven, you ask about Mary Magdalene. So I'll put that on the list. We can talk about her. Oh, let's see what else we have. AnMill, your question about the teaching that Jews need to build a third temple. Yeah, we'll put that on the list and we'll talk about that today. Thank you. Thank you for joining today. All right. Christine, you ask a question here. And that's about when it says when the perfect is come. We can talk about that. Go to those verses. Yeah, Julia, in reference to your membership, it's perfectly valid the way you have it. So just so you're all aware, I did add another option for Bible Scribe app membership, and that is, YouTube has its own kind of payment thing, membership system. So I did enable that this past week. So if you become a Bible Scribe app member on YouTube, that is another way that you can get that membership on the application. So both ways are valid. I personally prefer going on the Give, Send, Go route, but I opened up the other so that people would have that opportunity if they wanted to use it as well. Okay. Matthias, good morning to you. You ask, why did Mary bring 2 turtle doves for her ritual cleansing instead of a lamb after the wise men brought them all the gold, frankincense, and myrrh? Whew, that's a deep one. Let's take it. Let's do it. Christine, you gave me the reference for your question, so I've got that. Thank you. That'll help me go a little quicker. All right. Patriot, you asked if I got your question. I don't know if I did. Did I miss it? Let me see. Let me see if I see it up here. Did I miss it? Oh, I did miss it. It was at the very top. Okay. Scales in Revelation. Are they scales of justice or finance? Ah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk about that one, Patriot. No problem. And remember, we are going to do our next reading today in Mark chapter 7. We're going to go ahead and continue there, so that should be fun too. But that's a good number of topics. That's like 6 things, 7 things actually. So, oh wait, I'm looking at too much. No, it's about 5 things. Yeah, well, we're good. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and do announcements. Try to get things rolling a little quicker here this morning. My name is David, and I'm Bible Scribe. I've been doing the Bible Scribe channel on YouTube for about 5 years now, and we do this live stream every Sunday morning, as my schedule permits. Most Sunday mornings at 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. And so this is the routine. We start it up, we take questions, I take those topics live, and then we do a prayer time, very short prayer. We get started by reading the scriptures together. We're going through the book of Mark right now, and then we go into each of those topics. I'll just do my best with what I know, what I've had experience with, to answer questions or bring material to the table so we can look at it together. And I would hope that we can all discuss things in the comments together. Your participation is key. As you'll notice, everybody is pretty active in the comments, so that's a fun part of what we do. And I just ask that we be cordial to one another, even if we have disagreements. You won't see me lashing out at people, and I expect the same from my viewers. So please keep the comments civil, and we won't have any problems. With that, let me share my screen for a moment here. This is my website, bible-scribe.com. It's mentioned at the top left-hand corner of your screen. But it is a catalog of everything that I've done for the past 5 years or so. And so you can find tons of research material on this website. You can see how long the list is of different things we have done in the past. Excuse me, done in the past. My most recent work is listed at the top, but then some of my favorite videos here, and then just the entire list of what I've done in terms of research videos on the Bible and other ancient writings and topics. Now, you can also get to all of my live streams by clicking the live link at the top, and you can see that we've been doing the live streams for about three and a half, well, yeah, about 3 years now. But you can get to all those there. You'll see that on the top left here, there's a tile for the Bible app, the Bible Scribe app. And that is actually an application that I will be using on the live stream today. It houses the Bible plus many other ancient writings. You can see here the number right now is at about 40 writings. And you can search across, if you choose to, you can search across any of those writings. Now, when you register for this application on that site, you become a guest member, and that gives you access to only a select number of these writings, about 4 different writings. So if you want to become a member and search across all these, read all of these things, see the cross-referencing that exists between these different writings, then you need to become a full member, and that is $10 a month for membership. And the site itself will give you instructions on how you can become that member. You can do that by going to my Give, Send, Go account and applying the amount of money there that you want for a month's worth of service, or you can do a monthly thing that just charges you each month for the $10. And then also, as I mentioned, on YouTube now, you can choose that membership level on YouTube and just pay there if it's easier, if it's more convenient. Again, I prefer the other method, but if YouTube's the way that works for you, then go for it. I just need you to reach out to me and let me know. YouTube doesn't give me any information about the people that become members, so I do ask in the instructions there that you reach out to me, let me know your email address so I can activate your membership on the site, and I will do that. Other than that, as you can see, Bible Scribe, I'm on a lot of platforms here. I won't go through all of these, but the key ones where I'm the most active are Facebook and the Telegram channel. I'm a little bit active. I do post news information there that I find worthy of, what we do here on the channel. But YouTube is, of course, my main platform, and I do mirror everything on Rumble. So we have all of that. But you're welcome to explore that at your convenience. So thank you guys for joining this morning. I think it's going to be good. As far as this week, and I usually go talk about a little bit of what I've been studying over the week. I didn't have a lot of serious study going on this week. What I have been doing, though, and I'll just mention this. Let's see if I can show you kind of what I've been working on here. This document, as rough as it is, it's really notes. But what this is I'm taking the references to different things throughout prophecy. All the things that we talk about, Antichrist, the Great White Throne Judgment, the coming of Christ and God against Israel in 70 AD, all of these different things that happen in prophecy. What I'm doing in this document is mapping those out in chronology. So what you've got on the left is the thing happening. For instance, this is the saints reigning on thrones. And on the right, you have the reference to that in the particular writing that I was looking at. So this is in Tertullian's writing called On the Resurrection of the Flesh. In chapter 25, he talks about the saints reigning on thrones. So what this is doing for me is helping me sort out all of the different prophetic things that are said and mapping them so that they all flow together. It shows how they fit together. It shows that they are all consistent, because as when I get to the point I want to produce this into a video, you will see that all of these writings, and we're talking about the second apocalypse of John, the Sibylline oracles, the Bible, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, Revelation, you name it, there's a lot of these. Here we even have the book of 2nd Esdras. So interleaving all of these things is helping me get a very clear picture of prophetic knowledge. And so hopefully at some point I'll be able to present this in a way, and it's not going to be easy, but I'll be able to show this to you guys in a way that makes sense. And you see it just all flow perfectly together. It, I think, will help people make sense of many, many things, including the book of Revelation, which is so difficult. It's a very difficult writing to just pick up and understand much of, but this does help you map everything out so that it all flows together. So anyway, that's something that I've been looking at and have enjoyed putting together. It's a low stress it's a low stress engagement for me that is enjoyable, and so in my evenings I'm just working on that as time allows. But it's been good. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to turn out well. All right. So with that, that's about all that's been going on for me. I'd had a quick trip. I was out of town this weekend. Just got back in town to do this. So I'm excited to be here this morning with you guys. Mary Mundy Jones, I see you have a prayer request, so I'm going to take that down. And we will pray for you for that. It sounds like your ankle, some issues with your ankle. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you feel better and it heals well for you. All right. Flat Bob, I see your question. Yeah, I'll try to squeeze that in, Flat Bob, if I can get to it, because now that's at the end of the long list. Good morning, Squiffy. It's good to see you, ma'am. I hope you're doing good. Emma, good morning to you. See you there. All right. Austin, good morning. All right. Well, let's do this. Oh, and Monica Hayes, you ask about if you can get a copy of what I'm working on. Yes, I'm gonna do that. When I finish it, I'll get it on my website. It'll be a web page. You can just go to it. Perhaps I could make it a PDF too, so you could just download it. I don't care either way. Yeah, I would do that. I would make it available. Good morning, Stacia. Did I miss you? Sorry. Good morning to you. Okay. Well, let's do a quick prayer, and then we'll get started with our reading first, which would be in Mark chapter 7. So if you have prayer requests that have not been mentioned yet, and I hope I haven't missed any, but if you do have prayer requests, go ahead and mention them in the chat right now, and I can get those to our prayer group on Facebook, and we can pray for those throughout the week. Thank you for doing that. All right, I'll bow my head quickly and pray, and you can go ahead and put your comments, your prayer requests in the chat. Thank you. Lord God, I do thank you for this day. I thank you for time to be alive, for another day and breath in the lungs that you give. And I give you the glory for that, the credit. We should give you the credit for our lives, Lord. And we thank you so much for time to be together and to study and to learn. And I hope, Lord, that in this we show ourselves to be seekers of you, that we have a thirst for you. And Lord, help us to take that outside of just this meeting too and share with other people. Help us to be bold about what we believe and what we understand, what we know is true about you. And give us success in this venture this morning, trying to learn new things, discuss topics. Help me to be humble with what I can share and help people with, and help us to get to some answers. And we give you all the honor and praise and glory for everything that's going to happen. And it's in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we pray these things. Amen. Thank you, guys. Did I miss any prayer requests here? Let me make sure I get them before we move on. Good morning, Stacy. All right. Emma Coombs will continue to pray for Kent. I think we've prayed for him before, haven't we? But yes, thank you for that. Okay. Good morning, RLB. Andrew, good morning. Stacy, you say you had a praise request there for your son, that his pain is left and his foot is healing. That's incredible. I'm going to put that in our prayer channel as well. I want people to see that. That's awesome. Yes, praise God. Squiffy, you have a prayer request for your mother. Oh, sorry to hear that, Squiffy. I'll definitely pray for you and your family, and for your father specifically. All right. I'm really sorry to hear that. All right. Well, guys, let's go ahead and start with our Bible reading in Mark chapter 7 today. So let's open that up and go straight to it. So I'll just open up the app here, go to Mark chapter 7, and here we are. So let's jump back to chapter 6 just briefly. Let me make this a little bigger, and just in case you guys are trying to see it on a small screen. That's about the best I can do. So back in chapter 6, let's just see here, scanning, let's remember what we went over. Jesus started out in chapter 6 going to his hometown. He had trouble with his own family members, asking him to stop what he was doing, stop going everywhere and talking about all this nonsense. He also sent out the disciples 2 by 2 to different villages, towns around Galilee, to go to the synagogues and teach the Jews in those areas, and if they rejected them, to shake the dust off their feet and leave. So very profound statements from Christ about those places being judged for that. And then we had the story of Herod having John the Baptist beheaded. Now remember that that actual occurrence had happened much prior to this chapter, so it was a backtrack, a backflash, if you will, a flashback. Excuse me. So yeah, John had already been killed, but this was the story of the killing of John the Baptist. And then at the end, let's see, what did they finish up with here? It was the feeding of the 5,000, which was an incredible story that had references to the Jews and to salvation in history for them. And then, let's see, they were in Gennesaret. I remember looking at that on the map and seeing where that was at the southeastern side of the Sea of Galilee, if I'm not mistaken. But Jesus, again, having trouble staying away from the crowds. Now, so much of the word was getting out that, again, Jesus was just pressed constantly with multitudes of people. So much so that, as we talked about, they had a hard time finding peace just to eat their meals and get away from it. And so that was part of what we read in chapter 6. So now coming back to chapter 7, I think that's some good background. Let's go ahead and start reading here in verse 1. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain scribes which came from Jerusalem. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled hands, that is to say, unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding to the tradition of the elders. So the hand washing routine here, again, is part of the rabbinical teachings of the Jews. And they, of course, the Jews, scribes and Pharisees, getting angry at Christ for not following all of their man-made traditions and, quote, laws. Not part of the Mosaic laws, but part of their own laws. In verse 4, and when they came from the market, except they wash, or when they come from the market, speaking of the Pharisees and the Jews, except they wash, they don't eat. And many other things there are, which they have received to hold as the washing of cups and pots, brazen vessels, and tables. So they have all these different washing rituals that they do, again, all added to the law by their rabbis over the centuries. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not the disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but they eat bread with unwashed hands? So they're going to challenge Christ with this. The scribes and Pharisees come to him and they ask, why are they doing this? Why aren't you washing? And so, I mean, now my ears perk up, because every time Jesus answers these guys, it's like, it's just a carnival of fun because he's so good at it. And I think in this chapter, now that I'm seeing what's being talked about here, I'm remembering, I think this gets a little heated in this chapter, so this will be good. Jesus answers in verse 6 and says to them, well has Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites. As it is written, the people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So right off the bat, Christ is calling them as hypocrites without even answering their question. It's pretty bold. In verse 7, he says, howbeit in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. So he's specifically calling out these washing rituals as commandments of men. And so why should they be followed? He says, for laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such things like you do. And he said to them, full well, we reject the commandment of God. Full well ye reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own tradition. Now that's interesting to me. I'm guessing he just means in a general sense that they aren't following some of the commands of God. I don't think he's speaking to a specific commandment at this point. I think he's speaking overall, that you are focused on these little things, these washings, these rituals, but overall you're rejecting some of the commands of God to keep your own tradition, as he says. He continues and says, for Moses said, honor your father and mother, And whoso curses the father and mother, let him die the death. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, it is Corban, that is to say, a gift, by whatsoever you might profit by me, he shall be free. And ye suffer him no more to do aught for his father and mother. Now, the practice of Corban is something I have researched and studied, and I do feel I understand this part of this passage. It's a little difficult. We don't understand what Corban is. And even when you look up the definition of Corban, it's hard to kind of parse what is really being done at this time period and why it's so wrong. But as you can see, Christ calls them out, starting with that Moses says you need to honor your father and mother, and that is related to Corban. So what I understand about the practice of Corban at this time was that they could dedicate property and money, possessions, to the temple for temple use. And if that was done, then it was under the temple's control, and it's like you got certain benefits from that. You also weren't allowed to do anything with it if it was Corban, if it was given to the temple, to the priests, so to speak. So what would happen, and the reason that it brings the notion of honoring your father and mother into this, is that when a person's father and mother were getting older and they needed support, they needed help from their children. So as your parents were aging and they needed help, they couldn't keep up their properties, they couldn't take care of things. What would happen is that the Jews would use a loophole in the law, essentially proclaiming Corban on the estate of their parents until they passed along, and then it would, of course, pass over to the children. But in doing this, they would absolve themselves from taking care of their parents, because they would say, look, it's all under the temple now. It's under the... and I know that somewhat that feels odd and doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is what they would do. They would use this loophole in the law so they really wouldn't have to take care of their aging parents and their property. And so it was a big mess. And again, as Christ is calling them out for this hand-washing nonsense that they don't even need to do as part of the law, he's also calling them out because as he gives this example of how they are absolutely denying the commandments of God to honor your parents, they're using loopholes in their own laws to get out of their duties under God. And I hate to say this, but doesn't that just sound like a thing they would do? It sounds like those people, doesn't it? So anyway, that's what Corban was. It was their way of using rabbinical law to get out of having to help and care for their aging parents. And it's a sad, sad shame that they were doing this, and Christ calls them out on it. Because like it says in verse 12, you don't then allow them anymore. You don't allow people to do anything for their fathers and mothers. That's what it would result in. They wouldn't have to take care of their parents because they had essentially dedicated their parents and all their property to the temple, to temple service, so to speak. And so it didn't make any sense, but they got through this loophole and absolved themselves of helping their parents. All right, so verse 13, Christ continues on this tirade. He says, making the word of God of no effect through your tradition which you have delivered, and many such like things you do. And when he had called all the people to them, he said, hearken unto me every one of you, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. So this statement is one that I think a lot of people, including myself, wonder from time to time, is that really true? Is that really true? But I think if you consider it and really think through that, it does make sense. For instance, we are bombarded every day with things that are not godly. And there's no avoiding some of that, right? It's not like you go out in public. It's not like you go out in public intending to see women that are dressed scantily, or see people that are living the thug life, or so to speak, or acting in ways that are evil and abominable to God. You're going to see that on a daily basis. You're going to see it. It's not like you can avoid it. So what Christ is saying here, I believe, he's being very plain, really. But the things that you see or that you experience or that come into your life are not the things that defile you. It's how you process and respond. It always is about your response. In essentially every situation, you have the decision whether you're going to go along with the evil that you see or that's being done, or whether you're going to stand up against it, stand for yourself, stand for Christ. And so I think that is the point here. And if we look back at these scribes and Pharisees and what Christ just talked about with the laws they're abusing and their abuse of the people through the rabbinical law, you can see that I think in that way they see evils being done inside the priesthood and inside the Jewish elders and all these other things, and they're going along with it instead of standing against it. So I believe that's what Christ is talking about with them. Again, he kind of veils it a little bit in this statement, but it seems plain to me that that's what he is saying. And they have allowed themselves to be defiled over the years by participating in things like Corban and participating in the washing of hands and cups and bowls. It just doesn't mean anything to God. All right. So, verse 16 or 17, let's continue. When he was entered into the house from the people, so he's trying to get away from the people again, goes into a house, his disciples asked him concerning this parable. And he said to them, "Are you so without understanding? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without enters the man, it cannot defile him? Because it enters not into his heart, but into the belly, and it goes out through the draught, purging all meats." So apparently in this case, now Christ is kind of talking to them specifically about the eating of perhaps unclean foods. He's talking about meats. He says that when you eat meats, it goes through your body and the bad stuff is always expelled from your body. And he references meat. But I will say this, sometimes we need to be careful with the word meat in the Bible. Now, I'll just jump here in the Greek real quick because I want to show you this. So in this verse where he says it purifies all the meats, well, see, if you look in the Greek, another translation here is food. Let's go to this Greek word in Strong's. Broma is the root. And it really means food or meat of any kind. So I think maybe I'm pushing a little too hard into the idea that he's talking about maybe unclean meats here. I think he's just talking about food in general. He's using the digestive system that God gave a human to kind of represent something, and that's this concept that things that go into you can just be expelled, like things that are defiling. If you experience them, if you see them, if you go out and see things that you shouldn't, or part of things that you shouldn't be by accident, that's one thing. Those things can be expelled from your life. You just stand up against evil. But if you take it in and you process it and it becomes a part of you, you become part of it, that's the defilement. That's when defilement occurs. So he says in verse 20, that which comes out of the man, that's what defiles the man. For from within, out of the heart of men proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, theft, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All these evils come from within and defile the man. Again, it's never what is in your life that is the problem. It's always your response to it, what comes out of you because of those things If it's wickedness, then that's the defilement. Verse 24, and from thence Christ then arose and went to the borders of Tyre and Sidon. Let me see if I can grab the map of that. I'm pretty sure some of you guys will know where Tyre and Sidon are, but let me just show it to you on the map. Tyre and Sidon, we are at the Sea of Galilee, right? So we're in the Sea of Galilee, and what we're going to find is that Tyre and Sidon are over here on the coast you see at the north here. These two, and let me see if I can get, I got to get my pen back up so I can color. You know me and my crayons. All right. So if I take my crayons, we were down here at the Sea of Galilee and Tyre and Sidon over here on the coast, okay? So this is now saying that's where they have traveled to. So you just be aware too that in these passages, we got to realize there is a time element to this stuff. So the time element for them to travel all the way up here to Tyre or Sidon, and I'm not sure the routes they take. I don't know the old, traveling routes between these locations for sure. But not knowing that, there's obviously a few days worth of travel between some of these places, right? So when we are in Mark chapter 7 and we see, wow, okay, from there he arose and he went to the borders of Tyre and Sidon. That's like, 10 or 12 words, but it encompasses a day's worth of journey, right? So we just need to be aware that there is time involved here, that is sometimes we don't take account of. We just need to realize there's a lot of time going on here, a lot of things happening. All right. So here in verse 24, he goes to Tyre and Sidon, or it says into the borders of Tyre and Sidon, so probably in the area of the coast there. And he entered into a house, and he would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. So he didn't want to be publicly known at this point in Tyre and Sidon, but he couldn't hide it anymore. There were just too many people. Verse 25, for a certain woman whose daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet. The woman was Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it unto the dogs. So this, I think in our time, this seems like a huge slam. This is a huge offense, like you would be offended. But in this time, it was different, especially for a rabbi, which Jesus was seen as a rabbi, obviously, to say this about Gentiles versus Jews or Israelites. So for him to say this seems pretty rough to us, but maybe at the time period it wasn't quite as stinging as it sounds like it is. So I just want you to be aware. I don't think Jesus was really like slandering her in the moment. I think this was just kind of the way things were said. But he said to her, let the children first be filled. We can assume here he's talking about the children of God, the Israelites. For it is not meet, or it's not time or appropriate to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs, to those outside. And she answered and said, yes, Lord, but the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Which is an amazing statement. Her faith was great enough for her to persist, even after Christ said that, to persist and say, yes, but I will take even the crumbs that you will leave after you're done with your children, essentially, which is amazing. It's an amazing thing to say. And he said unto her in verse 29, for this saying, go your way. The devil is now gone out of your daughter. So he recognized her faith at that moment, obviously, and he immediately the devil was gone. He didn't even have to say anything that we know of. The devil was just out of her daughter at that moment. When she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out and her daughter laid upon the bed. So a very unbelievable remote healing that Christ did. And again, if you have to realize too, it's not like Jesus spoke an incantation or drew a sigil on the ground and then pointed in the direction of the daughter and zapped a lightning bolt that direction. You got to realize that if you asked Christ about this, he would say, here's what Christ would say about what power he used to do that healing. He would say, I am only doing what my Father has allowed or sent me to do. And so he would claim that he used the power of God to do that healing. I believe that seems to be what Christ always says about this kind of thing. I'm speaking what my Father has given me to speak. I'm doing what my Father has told me to do. I'm using the power of my Father. I'm in my Father's in me. All of that stuff comes to bear on this. So just realize the nature of what Christ does and how he accomplishes it is through the will of the Father. So in verse 31, again, he departs then from the coast of Tyre and Sidon. Now, we don't know what all happened there. That's interesting that it takes the time out. Now, again, that was a few days' journey to get to Tyre and Sidon, and the only thing that it talks about that happened there is this casting out of this devil from this woman's daughter. It's an amazing account, and we kind of, I don't know, it just makes me wonder, what is the significance of that? Is it more significant than I even realize? Because in 4 or 5 verses here, Christ and the disciples have traveled a few days' journey. They healed this girl, and because of the faith of this non-Israelite, this Gentile woman, and then they came back to the Sea of Galilee. So that's a period of like a week at least. Just very interesting to think through. Now, he says again, departing the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came to the Sea of Galilee, through the midst of the coasts of Decapolis. Now, I know that we talked about Decapolis last time. I just don't remember, honestly. Bible map Decapolis. I think I know where it was, but I'm not 100%. Yeah, that's where I thought. Okay. So Decapolis then is down in, and I think I personally identify it southeast again of the Sea of Galilee. So this is another long journey. Again, I don't know that we're fully getting, we're not getting all the events and all the things that are going on. But this travel then takes Jesus from the coast of Tyre and Sidon back down to the Sea of Galilee. And then, once they are there, probably travel across the sea and down here into, I went right through it. But down here into where I believe is Decapolis, which is this modern city of Irbid, I believe is where Decapolis was. It's a very populated area now, and I think, usually those towns and cities kind of relate to things that were back then. And so to me, Decapolis being mentioned in the scriptures as one of the most populated areas in this region, it makes sense that this would be the place. It seems to be in the exact location also from the other maps. So it seems like that's where they were now. Come down into this southeastern region. And as they were there, it mentions the coast. So he could have still been on the coast of the sea, but in that area of Decapolis, southeast. It says they bring to him one that was deaf, and had an impediment also in his speech, and they besought him to put his hands upon him. And he took him aside from the multitude, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spit, and touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed, and said unto him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And straightway his ears were opened, the string of his tongue was loosed, and he spake plain. And he charged them that they should tell no man. But the more he told them that, so much more the great deal they published it. So no matter how much Christ was telling these people, hey, just don't talk about this. I just did this for him. Let's keep this one quiet. It didn't matter. It went all over the place. And beyond measure, it says in verse 37, were more astonished, saying, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. And I do believe that would have been a clarion call to the Israelites. It should have been. They should have recognized that this was the Messiah, because things like this were prophesied in the Old Testament about Messiah. The deaf hearing, the dumb speaking. I believe those things are specifically mentioned in the prophecies. So to me, it's sad that they were so hard of heart that they couldn't see the Messiah right in front of them. But he seems to be doing everything he can to show them. And so that's where we end in chapter 7. So I appreciate you guys hanging with me on all that. And we will go into chapter 8 next time. And if I do have time during this week, I may go through chapter 8 during the week. We'll see if I can get to that. But yeah, it's a good chapter. It's a lot in there. Not as many mic drop moments in this chapter. He was traveling a lot. So it was probably tough for it to go into some of those deeper things. But, at this point, he started calling out the scribes and Pharisees. So there's going to be a lot more fireworks to come in the coming chapters with the Pharisees and the scribes. So that should be very interesting as we go. All right. Well, thank you guys for doing that with me. So anything good in the chat I need to be aware of here? Looks good. Looks good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and we'll get started on these topics. We do have a few to get to today. So let me do Patriot Keto Pop, your question about the scales in Revelation. So you ask, are the scales of judgment, the scales in Revelation, are they of justice, scales of justice, so to speak, or are they scales of finance? So let's pull that up together. Let's talk about that. So if we go over here and we'll jump to the book of Revelation. I believe we're going to be in chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So this is the 7 seals being opened. So remember that in chapter 5, God is shown on his throne. He has a scroll in his hand. It says book in some translations, but it's a scroll with seals on the scroll. And the way they would do it, too, as I understand, was the scroll would be rolled with seals in the middle, too. So when it has 7 seals on it, what I believe is happening is that one seal is popped, and as the scroll is unrolled a little bit, it'll come to the next seal. And then they have to pop that open and keep going as they go through the entire scroll. So that's the picture we're getting here. All the angels surrounding the throne of God, they cry, holy, holy, holy. Who is able and worthy to open the scroll that is in the Father's hand? And then they, of course, see the Lamb appear before the throne or come before the throne. And they say the Lamb is the only one worthy to open the scroll with the seals. So the seals start to be opened in chapter 6. He opens the first. It's a white horse with a crown and conquering to conquer. Then the second seal is a red horse with the ability to cause, I call it the chaos horse, because it causes peace to go from the earth and then people start killing one another. There's war, essentially. And then the third beast, the third seal is opened and a black horse is shown with the rider that has a pair of balances or a scale in his hand. So it does give you the imagery of like the scale of justice. You know, I think at the American Supreme Court, there's that iconic statue of the woman blindfolded with a sword in one hand and the scales of justice in the other. supposedly being that, our court systems should be blind in their distribution of justice, right? That they shouldn't be a respecter of persons, but should apply the law equally to all people in a blind manner. Now, whether that happens or not, that's another question. So this does give us that imagery, but when we look at what it's talking about, let's just read this verse and the next couple here. When he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. This is the scales we're talking about. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts saying, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. See thou hurt not the oil and the wine." And that's really it. That's all we get. So it's not a lot, but I will say that, Patriot, in regards to your question, to me this sounds like, when it's talking about food, commodities, so to speak, and how much they cost, it does seem to be, to me, a reference to financial trouble, okay? It's difficult to buy food. Now, the statement about, "See thou that you not hurt the oil and wine," that's a little tougher. Oil is to me, it makes me just wonder about what this exactly means. Oil is a very basic thing that everybody needed. Okay, everybody needed it because they ran lamps with oil, and so that was the only way they had light. They didn't have electricity, obviously. So that was crucial. Like, now it's one thing if food is tough to get because it's too expensive, but if there's no oil, then civilization starts to stop. It starts to grind to a halt. And the wine is an interesting thing too. I wonder about the wine. And this is all kind of speculation for me at this point, but I do wonder about the wine. Wine in the Old Testament, like if you read through the book of Proverbs, it talks about wine a few different times. And it is seen by the people as a method of dealing with stressful times, with difficulty. The book of Proverbs recommends against people who have high levels of responsibility from drinking wine because it is seen as a duller, a pain duller, and a way to escape, the troubles of the world. So to me, all of these things together in this verse about this pair of scales that this black horse rider has seem to have to do with the financial system and the difficulty of finances and affording things and the troubled times ahead. And so that to me is what it sounds like. I hope that helps, Patriot, with that. Red Raven, you ask, is this opening of the seals connected to Luke 4:17? Let me see if I'll take a look and see what I think here. Let me see what's in Luke 4:17. Luke 4, verse 17, right here. Okay. He came to Nazareth. Who is this? This is Jesus. He came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. And there was delivered to him the book of the prophet Isaiah. When he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." And he closed the book and gave it to the minister and sat down. And all of the eyes of them in the synagogue were fastened on him. Red Raven, I don't feel that the opening of the seals is connected to this. Of course, the book of John was written well after these events occurred. So Christ did this exact thing when in verse 17 and 18, when he was standing in this synagogue. We're talking about, around 30 AD. Well, the book of Revelation, as I understand it, I believe the book of Revelation was written in the 60s AD. So this would have been at least 30 or 40 years after Christ did this thing. So I guess then if you did believe it referred back to this, then it would be postscriptive instead of prescriptive, right? Meaning it's looking backwards instead of forwards. But I do believe that the seals being opened was a part of prescriptive prophecy in that case. So I believe that it was something that was in the future, but kind of also starting to happen already in 65 AD or so. Okay, that's my opinion on it. I don't think that that book or scroll was related to this scroll at all. Everything they had was written in scrolls. So I just think it was different. So if that answers. All right. Okay. Let's go on to our next topic then. I think we will go to Kathy's question. And I'll put it up as Deuteronomy 23:2. Your entire question, Kathy, was, why does God not allow the illegitimate child to enter the congregation of the Lord when the child had nothing to do with the circumstances? What about not having to pay for? And it cuts off there. I don't know if I missed part of it, but let's just read it and we'll talk about it. I may not have a good answer for this one. This is a tough one. So let's jump over to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 2. So let's start in verse 1. He that is wounded in the stones or the gonads has his privy member cut off, meaning a eunuch, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. An Ammonite or Moabite will not enter the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation, because they met you not with bread and water in the way when you came out of Egypt. They hired against thee Balaam, son of Beor. That's interesting. I just taught recently about Balaam. They hired him to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord would not hearken to Balaam. Yep. So it says you will not abhor an Edomite, for he's your brother. And you will not abhor an Egyptian, because you were a stranger in their land. The children that are begotten of them shall enter into the congregation of the Lord in their 3rd generation. So that's interesting. I suppose it's talking about the Edomites and Egyptians, that in the 3rd generation they would enter into the congregation of the Lord. And I'm confused a little bit. I'm trying to parse whether this is talking about children that Israelites might have with an Edomite or an Egyptian, like that they're intermixing or interbreeding, or what. That's where my mind's going. I'm not sure. This is difficult stuff, by the way. It's a little difficult for me. When the host goes forth against your enemies, keep thee from the wicked thing. This to me sounds like, if you're fighting your enemies, then keep yourself from the wicked thing, meaning don't intermarry with your enemies after you defeat them. That's what it probably is talking about here. If there's any among you, any man among you that's not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chances him by night he shall go abroad out of the camp and not come within the camp. But it shall be, when evening comes on, he will wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, will come to the camp again. Thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad. For the Lord thy God, now maybe this is key, maybe this is part of the key here. The Lord thy God walks in the midst of the camp to deliver you and to give up your enemies before you. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee and turn away from thee. Interesting. Thou shalt not deliver unto his master, blah, 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 blah. Okay. No whore of the daughters of Israel, and no sodomite of the sons of Israel. I mean, the whole litany here is all about keeping the camp clean and pure before the Lord, and it sounds like this verse 14 is key, because God would at times be walking through the camp in some regard, and it says to deliver you, meaning to that's the term used in their battles, to deliver them from their enemies. So, I don't know all of what this means, but it sounds like, in terms of the bastard child, verse 2, as you mentioned, Kathy, a bastard will not enter the congregation of the Lord. To me, it sounds like it's related to this cleanness thing and holiness, and that the Lord would be entering the camp at certain times, and that all of this, it's talking about people that are wounded in their privates or have theirs cut off. I don't know that this means anything like our modern transgender thing, but it's possible. They had the tradition of the eunuchs back then. So it's just, these are things that are very hard to understand for us in the modern time, I think. But in some way, this was to God keeping the camp clean. Now, it again, I think it, for instance, the bastards or the people that had a malady in their privates, or the Ammonites or Moabites, I believe they were allowed to be outside the camp. So it's not like they weren't there. From what it says down here further, it also talks about an unclean man, having to stay outside the camp. And it sounds like in all these cases, the people could be, quote, outside the camp and still be there with the nation. It just was that in the middle of the camp, and again, remember, there were instructions on how the camp should be laid out, where the tribes should be in relationship to each other, and all of this stuff. It was very complex, and I can't pretend to know all of it. But I think that all this is tied into that kind of cleanliness thing, and perhaps there was some kind of medical reasons that God wanted it this way for the overall health of the community. I don't know for sure. But in general, this is what I think we're talking about. And I really don't know that we have the full context of the time period to really understand all of it, to be clear, to be perfectly frank. Good to see you, Stacia. Sorry you got to go. See you later. Yeah, so I don't know, Patriot. Does that help a little bit? But I think that's the best I can do. This is a very difficult passage. Again, we don't have much of the social context they did, the historical context. So it's tough to know every single little thing about these guys and what these rules were about. But it sounds like it was related to God being in the camp from time to time and needing things to be just so that, he wasn't a part or parcel to anything unclean. That was what it was about. All right. Well, good. Maybe we got close enough for you, I hope. All right. King's Servant, I note your comment there. You say the camp references make you think of the camp of the saints and New Jerusalem and the list of who cannot enter. Yeah, Yeah, I see what you're saying there. And remember that, and of course, that stuff is talked about in the book of Revelation, and that really references the future. And specifically, that references the new heaven and earth. So, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it talks about the wicked will not be able to come to the New Jerusalem. Essentially, they won't be able to come to it. Now, it also just said that the wicked were judged and all thrown into Hades, right, into the lake of fire. So that's the reality: is there's not going to be the wicked, so to speak, in the new heaven, new earth, with some caveats perhaps. But yeah, it makes me think of that too. And I think that, again, this to me is another case of Israel foreshadowing everything in the future. God seemed to do that with everything about Israel, every single thing, just about. Because as time has gone on in my studies, I just keep finding it again and again and again. Just even as we were talking in the last couple weeks when we were going through earlier passages in Mark where he's healing people, and it seems to be a forecast, a foreshadow of what God is doing with humanity in history, not just with the Jewish race or the Israelites. So I think, again, that's a case of the same thing. Perhaps this information in Deuteronomy about the camp and keeping the defiled out or the unclean out of the camp, that's another symbol for what is expected in the future, for when heaven combines with earth and the new earth is laid out and New Jerusalem is planted and Christ and God rule from that place. There will be no uncleanness inside that place. There will not be. So maybe that's exactly what we can take from this today. All right. Flat Bob, you're ready for eternity right now. I think all of us are, really. I think we are. Maybe there's still things we can do here, and that's why we're still here. Maybe there's still stuff left for us to do. All right, next question is Robert. So let's go to that. Let me see how I get to what I've got here from Robert. Okay. Is technology men trying to reach God or heaven? That's kind of the gist of your question, Robert. You said it this way in totality. You said, do you think that high technological discoveries and artificial intelligence represents mankind trying to reach the heavens and God? Is it actually the modern day Tower of Babel? Yeah, so we did, was it last week or the week before? We did the Tower of Babel. We talked about that. And I think the question was there a portal at the top of the Tower of Babel? And we did expose that in the book of Jasher. We saw that the intent of the people and Nimrod, the leader of the time of Babel was Nimrod, and the people under him, their intent was to reach heaven and wage war against God. It was stated in the book of Jasher very plainly. And so we did speculate on what was at the top or going to be at the top of that temple if they finished it. Was it a portal? Was it a way to enter through the, quote, firmament into the heavens, perhaps? What was it exactly? We don't know for sure. So a little bit of speculation there. But it obviously was something that they were intending to do against God. So the question here, I think a lot of people in a very kind of metaphorical sense will say that, yeah, technology is our modern day Tower of Babel. We're trying to reach God, reach the heavens or whatever. Now, it's an interesting question because technology is so broad and vast. There's so many types of it. When you're talking about AI, there's different levels of AI, right? I mean, general AI, and using the word general is probably a bad thing because I'm not talking about general intelligence, AI, but I'm just talking about AI in general. The basics of AI are not anything spiritual or crazy like that. I am in the technology field, so I understand quite a bit about AI and how it works. There's no magic behind it. Not most of it that we see. There's no magic behind it. It's simply different ways of using data in ways that make it seem like and respond like a human in some regard, where you have a conversation, you ask it things, it tells you things, it responds to your questions. So that makes it feel like intelligence, right? Well, it's not at this point. Not most of it. So there are questions I do have about the fringes of this technology, not just AI, but other things. And there is technological things that have been talked about by whistleblowers, that have come out of places like Area 51, the S4 base, different underground military bases, or even just within the intelligence communities. Different people have talked about the different projects that are out there. There's Yellow Book, there's Looking Glass, there's Project Stargate, which was remote viewing, but there's other actual Stargate type projects that have been talked about. Now, I don't know fully about the credibility of all of that, but I have seen from multiple credible sources there are different things like that that are being done within the darkest recesses of military and intelligence community. So the question, I guess, is that the modern day Tower of Babel, where people are trying to reach into heaven, so to speak, and do something. I don't know if I would say that it is the Tower of Babel, or it's very similar, but I think in some ways it's an echo of that. I think they're doing things we shouldn't be doing. Does that make it? Is that clear? I think that, for instance, okay, so let's just talk briefly about the Project Looking Glass, okay? And I've done full videos on this on my SciCry channel, over 2 hours worth of different testimonies from people that seem to be first-hand testimonies, or at least credible testimonies about Project Looking Glass. So that is on the SciCry channel. It's relatively easy to find. But Looking Glass from multiple people has been said to have come from ancient Sumerian or Babylonian, if you will, cylinder scrolls. So cylinder seals, rather. So a cylinder seal is where they would essentially write in cuneiform, they would write an entire whatever information they wanted on the outside of a cylinder, so that they could then imprint that information by just in wet clay. They could roll that cylinder across the wet clay. It would imprint that information wherever they wanted to put it, right? That's what a cylinder scroll was. So the whistleblower testimonies are that, people dug up these things from ancient Babylon, and they were able to use the information contained therein to build out what they call Project Looking Glass. Now, I've heard from one or two testimonies that Looking Glass was not only because I think it was primarily used for a future looking device, like looking into the future or trying to gain information about what was going to happen in the future. Not only that as its primary use, but one or two whistleblowers also said that it could also be configured to be a point-to-point portal device. So if that's true, again, I can't know any more than any of y'all could if that was really true or not. But if that's true, then in a way that is kind of like the Tower of Babel. And if perhaps that same information, as far as we know from these whistleblowers, perhaps it came from Babel itself. Perhaps that was the technology that they were going to run at the top of the Tower of Babel. I mean, how would we really know? So I'm just putting that out as a possibility. It seems like a possibility. So I don't know to fully answer your question. It's hard to know people's motives when they're doing these things. What is the motives of the Vatican in the dark of night and behind the walls of the Vatican? What are they talking about? What is it they want to do? The Jesuits, what are their motives? What are the motives of the European nobility. What are the motives? I don't know. I don't know all of that. So we can only speculate. Are there motives to attack God and to use these tools to do it, just like the Babylonians did back in that time? I don't know. Maybe it is. So it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to know, but it is interesting to think about. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the next topic, I think. That's about all I can say about that. I hope, Robert, that at least answers your question. All right. Red Raven, you asked a question. You asked, since Magdalene means of the tower, is there symbolism significance that she was one of the first to see that Christ had risen? Well, let's do this. Let's put this on the board as the meaning of Magdalene. So, this is one, Red Raven, I'm not too familiar with. So we'll have to see if we can find some information here. You're saying since Magdalene means of the tower. Let's look that up real quick and see if we can find out more. So let's just search for Magdalene in the Bible. And we'll just go to Matthew 27. That's a standard place to see stuff about Magdalene. So here in verse 56, Matthew 27:56, we'll just go to the Strongs for this and start hoping to understand here. So Maria Magdalene. Yeah, okay, so in Greek it's literally spelled the same way as it looks in English. It's literally spelled exactly the same. Magdalene, a woman of Magdala, derived from Magdala, the town on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. There you go. Derived from Magdala, the town on the western shore of Sea of Galilee. Interesting. So, where we were talking about. Let's see if I can find that real quick. Bible map, Magdala. Just all this out of curiosity. Okay, so do you see this? It's saying that this is Magdala at the western side of the sea. You can see it on your screen right here, supposedly. So, many names in the Bible are kind of like this. They're like Mary of Magdalene. We just don't, we don't, in English, we don't really interpret it like that, but that's what it is. It's not her last name. It's her place of residence, like where she was from. Just like Joseph ben Ananias, right? It's Joseph, the son of Ananias or whatever. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that they're not last names. They're titles or, either their heritage or their place of birth. So just be aware of that. So let's go back over here. There is no direct Hebrew equivalent for Magdalene. The town of Magdala is sometimes associated with the Hebrew word Migdal, meaning tower. Okay. So this is Mary of Magdala, and the word Magdala is similar etymologically with Migdal in Hebrew. So I get the reference there. That's a little sketchy to me, but it could be that the town was named that. Perhaps they had a tower there. There was something there that made them think that that was the reason for the naming of the place. But not knowing, it's apparent that these scholars don't know. So, I don't know. We can only do with it what we can, but her name indicates her origin from Magdala. She's identified with a devoted follower of Jesus, present at the crucifixion, and the first to witness his resurrection. Magdala is a fishing town known for trade and industry. It's obviously a fishing town. It's on the Sea of Galilee. Okay. Yeah, there's just not a lot here further than that. Let's see. Yeah. So, I don't know, Red Raven. This is a tough one. It's tough when we come across this kind of thing. So your question specifically was that significant because she was one of the first to see that Christ had risen? I don't know. I really don't at this point. I was reading something the other day, and I noticed in a couple different writings I was analyzing, when it was listing those who had seen Christ after his resurrection, in one writing, I think Mary Magdalene was listed, but in another writing, she wasn't. And I still don't know. I didn't take enough time to dive into that, but I don't know why that was, right? So there may be more to learn about these ladies, particularly there, but at this point, I don't really know. I think I'm gonna have to take a pass on this one. I hate to say it. Stacy, you say you think she was a prostitute. Yeah? What makes you think that, Stacy? I am curious. It's possible, for sure. Ann Mill, you say, yes, Mary, the sister of Martha, anointed Christ's feet, and Mary Magdalene washed him with her hair. Yeah, that rings true. I remember that. Yep. I remember that. And Flat Bob, you said both Marys washed Christ's feet with their hair. Yeah, this is an interesting study that maybe that's something I can put on my list to kind of look at in the future. It's really who is Mary Magdalene? Who is Mary Magdalene? And then Martha's involved in that, and then there's another Mary, the other Mary, blah, blah, blah. It would be nice to sort through all that, So maybe in the future I can do some of that for you guys. All right. Let's go ahead and move to the next topic. I think we're getting close here. Well, we got 3 more. Let's see if we can get to them all. Let's see what time we got. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Okay, Christine, you asked about the verse that says, when that which is perfect is come. So let's put that on our board and talk through it a little bit. There we go. What is meant by when that which is perfect is come in 1 Corinthians 13:10? You were always taught it had to do with the rapture, but now I know that's not the case. All right, let's look at that. So 1 Corinthians 13. Let's do that. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 10. But when that which is perfect is come, that which is in part shall be done away. Right. The whole rapture thing is something that I don't know how to say what I'm thinking in my head. I'm trying to think through this real quick and say it. So, yeah, I forgot to share my screen again. I'm good at that. It says it right here in 1 Corinthians 13:10. So, what I was going to say, though, you mentioned the rapture. I understand the rapture now better. I understand why people held on to the rapture and made it the thing it was. And of course, you got to realize that it's all mixed in with dispensational theology too. And then it got Hollywoodized with movies and things like that and books. And it just became this thing that I think became way too important. Because, okay, so let's do it this way. Let's say this. I've realized there is a rapture, so to speak, okay? And it is at the great white throne judgment is talked about that all Christians would be gathered to Christ in the clouds, okay? That's what it is talked about in the passages that people think are rapture passages, okay? It's at the end of the world. It's when God is reformatting the earth into the new earth, and essentially we're all dead and our spirits are taken to to be with him in the sky. And so, yeah, there's a rapture, but the way people understand it. And I was telling somebody yesterday, I was talking to a good friend here yesterday, and I said to him, the thing that I've started to realize is that in some things we start with an understanding of some things, and sometimes some of those things are right in a sense, but it's skewed because of our leanings, our proclivities, what other people have said about them. And so for me personally, in my journey of research on the Bible and on prophecy and everything, it's almost like I had to go full circle and understand everything in a totally different way to get back to the things I originally knew about, for instance, like the rapture, but to understand them correctly in context with prophecy. So yeah, what I'm talking about, the event in the Great White Throne Judgment time period, when Christians are gathered to Christ's side in the sky, in the clouds, as he's about to judge all humanity, that's a totally different scenario, but it's the same thing that people misconstrued as rapture theology, well, they still do in modern Christianity, dispensational Christianity. So, yeah, to me, it's just interesting. But let's get back to this verse, Christine. Sorry, I went on a tangent there. And so what are we talking about in this passage? It's a short passage. It starts with, if I speak with the tongues of men and angels, and I don't have charity or love, I become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and knowledge, I don't have faith so that I could move mountains. And I don't have faith, I don't have charity or love, I'm nothing. Though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and I give my body to be burned. Now, he's talking specifically, when he says, though I give my body to be burned, he's talking about the martyrs who were doing this in that time period. This is Paul, of course, saying, if I don't give up even my body, that's what the martyrs were doing. But if I don't have love, it profits me nothing in the end. So if I didn't do that stuff out of love for people, love for building the kingdom for God, then it doesn't profit you a thing. So verse 4, charity suffers long, it's kind, love envies not, it does not care for itself, it's not puffed up, it doesn't behave unseemly or seek its own or be easily provoked or thinks evil. It doesn't rejoice in wickedness, but it rejoices in truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Charity or love never fails. Now, I want you to think, too, about these verses. It's very important to me when I come to these passages, this chapter. We always say love. We change this word charity to love, but I want you to think of it as charity. What is charity? That is you giving something to other people in a sacrificial way. It's like you giving something up for other people. And in fact, if you think about what is love, really, it is that. That is love. Being willing to give up things for yourself for another person. That is the basis of love. So I like to think of and use the word charity in this passage just because it makes me understand what is being talked about better. So when you're sacrificially giving to someone, sacrificial giving never fails. But where there's prophecies, they will fail. Where there's tongues, they will stop. Where there's knowledge, it will vanish. We know in part, we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part will be done away with. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, understood as a child, thought as a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things. So in a way, Christine, to me, in a way, this is talking about the rapture-ish. It's talking about the end. It's talking about when that which is perfect is come. He's talking about the new heaven and new earth. He's talking about when God cleanses the earth and fixes everything. So that's really what it's talking about. He's comparing that to prophecies, which prophecies give a shadow of what's to come. They give a forecast. They give some information. What does the other passage say? As if through a glass darkly, dimly. But yes, when that which is perfect has come, when the kingdom is delivered to God and it comes to the new earth, all of these other things will mean nothing. They will be gone. And I believe that's what verse 10 is talking about. When that which is perfect has come, that which is in part, which he mentions the things that are in part. In the same context, he's mentioning that as being prophecies, tongues, knowledge. That's all in part. Perfection comes when God finishes this. Okay, when he finishes this, it's perfect. And that word perfect, by the way, in the Greek, not only means what we say as perfect, it means what is complete. When that which is complete is come, which is final, which is complete, all of it, then all the things in part are done away with, okay? We put away the childish things. So I hope that kind of gives you the view there. That's my view. I think that's correct. See, Elwing, you agree with me there. Good. Appreciate that. It's good to see you. I don't think I've ever said hi to you before. Good morning. Let's see. Samuel, you ask which book and chapter. I'm trying to see if you're responding. You're asking me or if you're asking somebody else. I'm not sure. All right. Cool. Great, Elwing. It's good to have you. All right. I think that's about it for this one. Let's go on to the next one. It may be our last. I know, Flat Bob, you had a question that's at the end, but I may just quickly answer that at the end. We're running out of time. Matthias, though, you asked a question. Why did Mary bring 2 turtle doves for her ritual cleansing sacrifice instead of a lamb after the wise men brought all the gold, frankincense, and myrrh? That's an amazing question, Matthias. It's one I really haven't thought about before. So let's see if we can find this thing. I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to look for dove in the Bible, and I'm going to look for it at about the time where it would have been talking about Mary. Let's see. I don't see it mentioned here. If Matthias, you are on and you have a verse, please mention it. Or if anyone knows where this might be talked about. Maybe here it is. Luke 2, verse 24. Maybe this is it. So let's see here. Yep, this is it. I found it. Okay, we're good. Sometimes I don't see things right away. Okay. So after Gabriel comes to Mary, it says Mary kept all these things, pondered them in her heart. And the shepherds returned to their town, I guess, glorifying and praising God for all the things they heard and seen, as it was told to them. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcising of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were accomplished, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it was written in the law of the Lord, every male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. and to offer a sacrifice according to that which was said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves, and or 2 young pigeons. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem, his name was Simeon, blah, blah, blah. So that's all it really says, right? That's all it says. Okay. So the 8 days accomplished for the circumcision, and then I remember in the Old Testament, we're going to have to find it, that the woman after giving birth was unclean for an amount of time period, and she apparently, I may not remember it, but she was apparently supposed to make a sacrifice to cleanse herself and be declared clean by the priests after having the child. So let me see if I can find now where that happens in the law. Here's Leviticus. Let me do another search. I think I may find it quicker. Let's see if I do man, child. Oops, not ma child, man, child. And I'm looking in Leviticus. Okay, here we go. Let's see. This might be it. Leviticus chapter 12. Verse 2, speak unto the children of Israel, the Lord says to Moses, if a woman has conceived seed and born a man-child, she will be unclean 7 days, according to the days of the separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day of the flesh of his foreskin will be circumcised. Okay, so that's what they did. They brought Jesus for that. And then she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 3 and 30 days. She shall not touch a hallowed thing or come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. But if she bears a woman child, a maid child, a girl, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation. Continue to the blood of her purifying 66 days. Okay, so for a man it was 3 and 30 days, 33 days that she continued after the circumcision, for 33 days. She was unclean until her days of purifying are finished. And when they are fulfilled for a son or a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation unto the priest, who shall offer it before the Lord and make an atonement for her. And she shall be cleansed from her issue of blood. This is the law for her that has borne a male or female. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, she will bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering, the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. All right, so that seems to answer the question, Matthias, that in verse 8, if she cannot afford or is not able to bring a lamb, then she takes 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. And she offers one as a burnt offering and the other as a sin offering. And the priest makes atonement for her. Does that not answer the question? Now, you mentioned the wise men bringing them gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And that's an interesting thing because the gold, frankincense, and myrrh is projected in the book of Adam and Eve. If you've ever read the book of Adam and Eve, the first book of Adam and Eve, it talks about gold and frankincense and myrrh all being a part of Adam and Eve's possessions after their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. They were given rods of gold by God, and I don't remember exactly the statements on the frankincense and myrrh, but I believe all of those things were represented at that time. And again, because they got, Adam received prophecies of the Messiah from God, perhaps that was signs of the prophecy he was being given of the Redeemer, of the Messiah. So very interesting, those connections. I'm not sure it answers any more questions about, why the wise men brought specifically the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, but perhaps because they knew of those old prophecies. They knew of those writings. it only seems to make sense. And of course, the gold seems to be a representation of the kingship of Christ, that he was the king, and the frankincense and myrrh, I think both were embalming for her, like death, for making dead bodies smell okay and preserve them. I may be mistaken there on both of them, but I think they were both for that purpose, for the embalming of dead bodies. So in those gifts, they were representing not only Christ's kingship, but his death, burial, and resurrection that they were expecting. So a lot of really deep meaning there with everything that happened. All right. Yeah, and Red Raven, your comment there about Christ was the lamb, so why bring a lamb for the offering? I think that's an astute point. I think it's a good point. Yeah, that's really cool. All right. Okay, let's do the last one. We got to the last one. So let's do it, and then we'll be done for the day, guys. It's been a lot of fun. Let's see. Flat Bob, you asked this. Why do some people say Enoch is not scripture when the book of Jude literally quotes from it, as well as Christ himself referencing it? Why is Enoch not considered scripture? This is a good question. And you're right. So if we go over to the book of Jude, let's do it real fast. Jude. Yes. The angels which kept not their first estate and left their habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chains and darkness unto the judgment of the great day. That's, of course, the great white throne judgment. So yes, this does reference the exact same things that the book of Enoch references. And let's see, I think I've got this cross-reference to the book of Enoch, chapter 6, verse 2. It says, the angels, children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, meaning the wives of, or the human women. And they said to one another, come, let us choose wives from among the children of men and beget us children. So yes, the book of Enoch does plainly echo what is said in the book of Jude. And, some people say it is a quote. I'm not sure it's a perfect quote, but it is close enough. It's obviously the same. Now, the thing to me that's crazy is when I forced myself to read through a lot of the early church writings, the early church fathers, the stuff that came out after the Bible in the first couple centuries after Christ, a lot of those guys talked about this stuff. I mean, tons of references. They all talked about it as well. So they knew about the book of Enoch. It wasn't like some secret that nobody knew about. It was common knowledge. It was very common knowledge. The Ethiopians in their writings, they for one kept and regarded the book of Enoch very highly. We have some of the oldest translations of the book of Enoch are in the Ethiopic language. And they also had the books like the Kebra Nagast, which recorded the same events. So yes, let's just put it this way. The book of Enoch is very authoritative, and it's cross-referenced in many places in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in Ethiopic writings and in the early church fathers. All these different places cross-reference those works. So for me, I don't even have to think that the book of Enoch is scripture. It doesn't matter to me whether it's part of the Bible or it's not part of the Bible. It's so valuable to me that I hold it in high regard, and I study it, and I use it for information, for understanding. So I think I would just encourage Christians to think of it like that and not worry about whether it's included in the canon of Scripture or not. By the way, the idea of the canon of Scripture, as I've understood it through history, is sort of a false idea. That there was ever one single grouping of books that was simply, these are only accepted and no others are accepted. That idea is incorrect.
What you see instead of that throughout the early church is you see at one time one mentioning a certain group of texts that was really good and they thought was very authoritative. At another time, you'll see a slightly different set of books mentioned by another church father that was very authoritative. And then even up into the 3rd and 4th century, you'll have someone like Eusebius saying most of the church agrees on all of these books, but there are some to watch out for. So what you see through history is simply men of God, these early Christians, church fathers, if you want to call them that, but men of God writing down lists of books that they thought were authoritative based on what they knew from their church experience. So what? They were all these writings written by men of God. Now, the book of Enoch was held by the Jews for centuries before Christ. For centuries before Christ. We have it proven in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the Dead Sea Scrolls are estimated to be at least 500 years old prior to Christ. But the reality is they probably are copies of copies that were centuries and millennia old. So, yes, I value the book of Enoch and put it in high regard right alongside the scriptures in my library, if that helps. I just hope that gives you my perspective. I don't try to tell people, yeah, it should have been part of the Bible, and it's not. That kind of conversation doesn't usually help anybody. It just causes people to kind of argue and get their feathers in a ruffle. And so I would much rather say, look, it's a valuable book. I hold it in high regard, and the reason I do is because Christians in the earliest times after Christ held it in high regard. So did the Ethiopian Christian nation. So did the ancient Jews and Israelites held it in high regard. So I do as well. So I think that's the best we can do with some of those writings. Like, we just have to recognize that they're valuable and we need to read them. Now, does that mean we take every single thing in them as a 100% stated fact that we, can? It's not like that. It doesn't have to be that way. Instead, what it needs to be is we're going to absorb that information and understand it in context with the rest of the information we have. And we start to do that, things start to line up and we start to understand more. Instead of trying to make empirical rules about, well, I need to check that every single thing in this whole writing is 100% accurate. Instead, what we see in the book of Enoch, not that I'm saying anything in there is inaccurate, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that if you take the corpus of the book of Enoch and you compare it with other writings and the scripture, it matches. It matches all of it, and it reinforces the things you see in the other writings and in the scriptures. So yes, it is valuable, and it is good for us to study it. Adam N., I really like that statement. You say we should read and allow the Holy Spirit to help us discern. I think that's true. And I think that if you have that mindset, it's a humble mindset. It is the mindset of, I am going to read for my edification. I'm going to do my best. And God, please help me. Please help me understand what I'm reading. And help me also discern whether there's any deception involved. And help me discern whether this matches other things that I have read. But again, yeah, the book of Enoch I see as a super valuable book. In fact, after a Christian has read the Bible, I think they must read the book of Enoch to get a full understanding of the things the Bible talks about. I really do. And there's actually a number of books that I feel that way about, other writings other than the Bible. So, all right. Oh, and by the way, I just want to say this. When the ancients said scriptures, like when they said as it is written, or the scriptures or the holy books, this was one of the books they included when they were talking about that, okay? So we're pretty much sure about that now because of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovery, okay? So yeah, it's just, anyway. That's a really good point, Zone Mark. You said there were 2 or 3 copies of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but there were about 7 copies of Enoch. That is pretty interesting. Oh, Amber, you ask, which books do I feel are important? Oh, my goodness. Well, let me see here, because a lot of them I have in my Bible Scribe app. So let me look at these and just kind of go down through here. I think that the Deuterocanon is important, and that includes Tobit and Susanna and Bel and the Dragon. I think those are important to a point, definitely for understanding the culture of the times and a lot of the stories, that go along with the scriptures. A lot of these writings in this tool I've got are in here because I value them. The Ascension of Isaiah, I think, even though it was a late writing, I think it's important. Some of those apocryphal works are a little less important for me, but still interesting. So Book of Enoch, definitely. The Book of Adam and Eve, I think, is incredible and should be a part of every Christian's reading. The first book of Adam and Eve. The Book of Jubilees is good, although I don't know that I would consider it required reading, but it is very good. The Book of Jasher is also very good, and I kind of lump those two together. I think it's valuable to read. Jasher gives some important details about some things that happen in the Bible in the book of Genesis that are very amazing, like the stuff about the Tower of Babel. It talks all about that. It also talks a lot about Abraham and how his life was as he came out of the Babylonian culture, the culture of the Far East there. Let's see. To me, the Sibylline oracles are incredible, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they are a required reading for Christians, but it is a very important prophetic writing or writings. I think the books of Esdras and Baruch are very good, very helpful. I don't know how like crucial they are for a Christian to read, but in terms of prophecy, they're very helpful to understand. Let's see what else here. The Ladder of Jacob, to me, and the Apocalypse of Abraham are two writings that they expound on some events in the Old Testament in Genesis and Exodus that I think it's important for Christians to understand. So that it fills in some gaps in the Bible, those two writings. Now, of the early Christian writings, I have a hard time separating these out and saying, well, I like this one better than that one and this one and that one. To me, the early Christians, you should just read them. And I don't think that there's any one in particular, although I will say Tertullian's work is incredible. The writings of Josephus are important, of course. He's not a church father, obviously. I think I have him. I'm not sure why I have him here under the early Christian. I have that miscategorized. The Clement of Rome is really good because he's one of the earliest Christian bishops out of Rome. But Clement, to me, is I don't know how to say this. It's not as amazing to me. Now, he's mostly just giving very practical teaching to the Christians of the time. So Clement of Rome's writings, while they are very good, he writes a lot, but it's mostly about behavioral Christian ethics, right? Morals, helping the Christians of the time to live holy lives. So to me, it's a little less interesting than some of the others. I think the Epistle of Barnabas is a very incredible writing. It gives a lot of detail about Mosaic law and reasons certain things were done. He gives a lot of detail there that's just incredible. So the Epistle of Barnabas is a great one. I will say this, I don't have this in here, but the writings of Eusebius, is it of Pamphylia? There's two Eusebiuses, and I just want to make sure I tell you the right one. The Eusebius that wrote the church history, Eusebius Pamphilius, also known as Eusebius of Caesarea. His book, The Church History, and he wrote it about the time of the Council of Nicaea. Now, realize, I don't think Eusebius was stained by the council. I think the council was actually a very bad thing that happened in Christianity, and that's antithetical to what most Christians teach, but I truly believe that. Eusebius, by the way, was an Arian. He was not a Trinitarian. And he wrote one of the most incredible, I think, Christian documents that we've got, and that is his church history. So if you have a chance, and it is a lot, it's a long writing. So if you have a chance and you want to get started on Eusebius church history, that you will not go wrong. There are so many incredible details given about the early church in that. So many amazing things that he talks about. It's incredible. So that's a really great writing too. Well, anyway, so I think that's why I'll leave that list as far as things you should, that I read and that I consider very important writings. But there's probably more. but that's a good list. Ever Mateo, you ask, do I think Christians should know about the occult? You're on the fence about even hearing anything about it. Ever Mateo, yes. I personally have read a lot of occult work. I have read a lot of it. I have read even medieval grimoires on how to summon demons. I've read the works of John Dee. I have read Madame Blavatsky. I've read, as you guys know, because of my recent series on the alien stuff, I've read tons of alien abduction stuff. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, or at least portions of that. I've read New Age books on star people and the Maitreya and all this other gobbledygook. Now, I will say this, like some of you mentioned earlier, I prayed before doing some of that God would protect me from the material I was reading, that he would keep me in sound mind while I was reading those things and protect me from it. So, but I think it did expand my knowledge and understanding of how Satan works. And I don't know that that's for everybody to do necessarily, but I think that, a mature Christian can successfully read through that type of thing, not be affected by it. For me, it almost was a mandate by God that I think he gave me to read some of this stuff. But I would say you got to just be careful. Know what you're reading, know what you're getting yourself into, and I would pray protection as you read those types of things if you do. And again, I don't think it's for everybody. So I seen, let's see, on Mill, you ask if any of them, I think you mean the writings I'm talking about, refer to the millennial reign having already taken place. I'll quickly answer that, and I think we'll be done after that. But so Ann Mill, the millennial reign is a interesting phrase that people use for a number of different things, and sometimes they lump multiple different things together with that phrase. So there are a few reigns that occur, and there's actually two that are a millennium. So you got to be careful what you mean when you say the millennial reign. Okay, so in Revelation chapter 20, you have Satan being bound for 1,000 years, and it says in that passage that the saints were reigning with Christ at the throne of God in heaven. So that is one, quote, millennial reign, but it's not the one most people are talking about. That was in heaven by the throne of God, and it was the saints reigning with Christ on the throne. Now, as we understand from the scriptures, Christ reigned on the throne beside God from the time he ascended even to the present and will into the future, because that is a kingdom that lasts forever. Okay? So a lot of people, when they say millennial reign, they talk about the 1,000 years that Satan was bound, which I believe has come and gone. It's over with. Satan is unbound now. And we are in what we call the little season, the season during which Satan has a few years left. He's trying to do some crap. And in the end, God's going to shut it all down and remake the earth. But see, there was another 1,000-year reign that the saints, and I reading through the early Christian writings is where I found all this information. Okay, the early Christians, early Christians, 1st, 2nd century, 3rd century. Okay, that's before the Catholic Church. And it's before a lot of the corruption. Okay, any of the corruption, really. So the other millennial reign that they talk about is that after the destruction of earth and the new earth comes, that Christ will reign on earth with God and with all believers and with all angels, heaven and earth combined, and he will reign for 1,000 years in that way. So when we have the writings of Papias, who was a very early Christian, early church father, so to speak, in the 1st century, like the time of Christ. And we really don't have full writings from him. We have quotes that other people had of him. He's one that talks about Christ reigning on earth. Well, the understanding that matches all the prophecies and all the things the other church people were talking about is that that reign occurs after the new earth is established, after the earth is cleansed. And so they expected then a 1,000-year reign of Christ on the new earth. Okay? So yeah, there's 2 different millennial reigns that need to be considered. And I think people confuse the 2 because they don't have really the background on both. So I hope that helps. Yeah, and mill. And so you're mentioning the old world buildings. You know, a lot of people online are talking about that kind of stuff. I have talked about that stuff also, the old world buildings and the different things that some of those channels go into. However, I have a different opinion on them than most of those old channels. It's hard to go into all of it very quickly, but I believe that the reign that was occurring during that time was only in heaven, and that God also was waging war against the nations at that time period. And so some of the things that those channels might see as cataclysms or the whole world was wiped out or something like that, I don't see it as anything other than God waging war on the wicked nations of earth from heaven because of the reign of Christ in heaven. And I recognize the old world buildings and architecture were incredible. And I attribute that to the fact that many of those nations were free under Christ to do whatever they wanted to do. And they had the ability, just as we actually have the ability to build incredible buildings, we just don't because our societies are built on a capitalistic profit motive that keeps us enslaved to building things at low cost and easy construction. We don't spend time carving out or doing, marble work or statuaries anymore. We don't do that stuff. But those people at that time were free from the grip of the old world pagan gods and cultures. They were rediscovering themselves in the freedom of Christ that he had brought to their nations. And they were also exercising their skill sets for the glory of God on earth. But I don't think that Jesus was reigning on earth during that time period. At the same time period, also, you need to recognize we see Rome being destroyed all the way up through the 5th, 6th, 7th century. Rome is being attacked and destroyed by many Christian nations. So it's just an interesting thing when you step back and you know the history of what happened. You start to realize maybe what the real picture was. And I just don't think it was quite as fantastical as some people try to make it out online. But that's just my take based on my research. And my video series called The Cataclysm of Rome, it's a 4-part series. It talks you through a lot of that, especially the first one. The first one talks you through a lot of that. And then the last one also goes into kind of the events that occurred throughout history that made that possible and real. So anyway, I hope it helps. And, I'm humble enough to acknowledge that I may be wrong about some of it. But I feel like the history has shown me. It's the reading and the study that has shown me what my opinion is. I have based it on that. And so I'm not just making guesses. I'm using historical facts and evidence to back up what I say. Yeah, no problem, Ann Mill. All right, guys. Well, I think we're going to cut it today because it's been great. We've had a lot of good discussion and gone through some great topics. So thank you for bringing those topics. And I noticed there were some new people. Thank you for joining today and being with us and spending the time. And I just wish you all the best week. Have a good one. Take care of yourselves and pray for the prayer requests you saw. I will go ahead and put our prayer requests that I got into our Bible prayer channel on Bible Scribe on Facebook. And we will be praying throughout the week. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your time and your attention and your participation in the chat, as always, guys. God bless you this week. Take care of yourselves. Bye.